filters that treated Gypsy Rose Blanchard go onto her docuseries and quite literally either lie to the entire.
When Gypsy Rose Blanchard stood in court, the world was introduced to a vulnerable young woman, seemingly broken by years of unimaginable abuse at the hands of her mother, Dee Blanchard. By her side was defense attorney Mike Stanfield, the man who expertly crafted the narrative that transformed Gypsy from a criminal into a victim. His argument was compelling. Gypsy had been trapped in a toxic cycle of manipulation and abuse, with no escape. It was a story that captivated the masses, sparking a blend of sympathy, outrage, and a deep need for justice. But what if the story we'd been fed wasn't the whole truth?
And misrepresent what was actually within the medical records, or B, have footage manipulated and that's not really what they said or how they felt.
What if some of it was carefully engineered, or worse, outright fabricated? One of the most shocking moments of misinformation unfolded in the HBO documentary Mommy, Dead and Dearest. In one of the key scenes, Mike Stanfield is seen reviewing Gypsy's medical records with her father, Rod Blanchard, and stepmother, Christy. He points to a particular doctor's note which claimed Gypsy had developmental delays, but then he zooms in on an eerie detail. Dee allegedly covered Gypsy's ears to prevent her from hearing what was being said. This subtle moment became the backbone of Mike's argument, painting Dee as a manipulative puppet master, desperately trying to maintain her web of lies. But as time passes, cracks begin to show in Gypsy's narrative.
I don't know why these procedures were done, or how her mother was able to convince the doctors. Mind-boggling is the only way I can put her ability to manipulate people.
And we're only scratching the surface. What if the story that has been drilled into our heads about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the helpless victim and Dee Blanchard as the villain, wasn't just shaped by the facts, but also by a performance designed to sway public opinion? One of the most powerful moments in this case wasn't just about the words spoken. It was about how they were delivered. Mike's reading of the medical document was a masterclass in dramatic storytelling. His tone, pacing, and setting were all perfectly orchestrated to reinforce the emotional weight of Gypsy's victimhood. It was a moment that was meant to shock the audience into believing Dee's manipulation of her daughter was even more sinister than it appeared. But there's a problem. The actual document Mike was reading wasn't a smoking gun. It simply stated that Dee had covered Gypsy's ears to stop her from hearing a doctor mention that Gypsy was clumsy. That's it, a far cry from the controlling manipulation Mike implied. So why twist such a minor detail? The answer lies in the power of storytelling.
People saying that criminal defense attorneys have no conscience, and they're liars, and they're bad people because of who they defend, and I don't necessarily believe that's true. There's a lot of attorneys that are really good people and actually use the truth. But this is an example of one of those bad attorneys.
By focusing on the imagery of Dee covering Gypsy's ears, Mike cleverly played into the larger narrative of a controlling mother, even though what could have been seen as a protective gesture was instead portrayed as another example of manipulation. What's even more shocking is that Rod and Christy, who had access to the same records, never stepped in to correct Mike. Why stay silent? Were they caught up in the defense's narrative, wanting to see Gypsy receive a lighter sentence? Or did they fear that contradicting Mike's version of events could undermine the case? The more you dig into the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, the more unsettling details emerge that suggest the story we've all been fed.
He just didn't think that this information would ever go public. So I want to know, why? Why would he be willing to lie for Gypsy Rose Blanchard? And what did he expect to gain from doing so? Because if you pay attention, you can see he's still very much a part of her career right now. And that's pretty rare.
May not be as simple as it seemed. Gypsy's defense was carefully constructed to portray her as a victim, trapped in the cruel grip of a mother who manipulated her entire life. While the public bought into this narrative, thanks to a carefully staged trial and media strategy, there's growing evidence that the truth may have been skewed and possibly altered along the way. Let's start with how the defense team, led by Mike Stanfield, managed to turn the tide of public opinion. One of the key tactics used by the defense was their ability to frame Dee Blanchard as the villain in this narrative, By highlighting her controlling behavior, manipulation of medical professionals, and alleged physical abuse, they painted a clear picture of a mother who used her daughter's illness to secure attention, sympathy, and financial gain. This portrayal was compelling, emotional, and, to many, seemed like a textbook case of maternal abuse.
Especially a public defender, to stick around in the way that they stay with somebody for that long. Usually if somebody has a public defender, they get sentenced and they get a new one and a different one, blah, blah, blah. But he's stuck with her. That's odd. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village of liars to elevate someone like Gypsy Rose Blanchard to the platform then.
But there's more to the story that we need to explore. A glaring red flag is how Gypsy's medical history was presented. Gypsy's defense team was quick to bring attention to the idea that her numerous medical procedures were unnecessary, designed to keep up the illusion of illness. While that may be true to some extent, it's essential to ask why a medical malpractice lawsuit wasn't filed against the doctors who enabled Dee Dee's behavior. If Gypsy's doctors were truly complicit in this web of lies, why was no action taken against them? Wouldn't filing a malpractice suit be the natural next step in a case that painted Gypsy as a victim of systematic medical abuse? By not pursuing that route, the defense avoided drawing too much attention to the medical records, which in turn might have uncovered inconsistencies that could have raised serious doubts about Gypsy's role in the situation. Instead, the strategy was to keep the focus squarely on Dee Dee's manipulative behavior.
Simply lied to the doctor about something. Mentally, Gypsy is behind. She's at the level of a 7-year-old on mother's information. And this is something that you see almost across all of the records is upon mother's information, upon history by mother.
The question remains, why didn't the legal team challenge the very system they accused of failing Gypsy? They had a clear path to accountability, but they chose not to take it. Could this be because they feared what would come to light if they probed deeper into the medical records? Were they simply focusing on the most straightforward path to win the case, or was there something more strategic at play? Dr. Bernard Flesson, one of the few medical professionals to publicly question Gypsy's diagnoses, made waves in the media when he stated that he believed Gypsy was never really suffering from muscular dystrophy or cerebral palsy. He went on record in both Mommy Dead and Dearest documentary and the Lifetime series, claiming that he saw no evidence of the illnesses that Gypsy had been diagnosed with. However, his statement about her muscle biopsy being normal was soon contradicted by the actual medical reports. Gypsy's biopsy did, in fact, show abnormalities, specifically type 2 muscle atrophy, meaning her muscle fibers were irregular. It wasn't a case of completely normal results, as Dr. Flesson suggested.
And why did Dr. Robert Seal go into that docuseries, being a champion for Gypsy Rose and apologizing to her, saying that he's so sorry he didn't do enough, when he received a personal letter from the geneticist that ran the test for Gypsy Rose Blanchard that confirmed that she did in fact...
Why did he misrepresent the results? Was it a simple oversight, a mistake? Or was he intentionally leaving out details that didn't align with his argument? The more we look into these inconsistencies, the more it becomes clear that the facts were often twisted to fit the narrative that Gypsy was an innocent, helpless victim. Moreover, the role of Gypsy herself is highly significant. She has been known to tell conflicting stories about her medical history and the abuse she endured. In a famous interview with Dr. Phil, Gypsy claimed that she later discovered her biopsy results were normal, which would contradict the actual findings. With no medical documentation in front of him, Dr. Phil took her word at face value, just like much of the public did. But when compared to the actual medical records,
a chromosome microdeletion, the 1q21.1. He gave him very specific information how a large portion of that first chromosome was deleted.
Discrepancies emerge, and we have to ask, did Gypsy misrepresent the truth intentionally? Or was she, like everyone else, swept up in the story being carefully constructed around her? Was she simply repeating what she had been told? Or did she truly believe that her history of medical mistreatment was exactly as she described it? Then there's Mike Stanfield, Gypsy's defense attorney, who played a pivotal role in crafting the version of events that would ultimately win her a plea deal. His influence cannot be overstated. Stanfield knew how to control the narrative, not just in the courtroom, but also in the media. His strategic use of emotional moments, like reading medical documents in a dramatic tone, was designed to cast Dee Dee as a villain and Gypsy as an innocent, sympathetic figure. His portrayal of Gypsy was so effective.
And all of these things. So it's either the doctors are straight up lying to everybody's face for, I don't know how much or what they were paid, because I mean, if you think about it, they quite easily.
That it was easy for the public to view her as a helpless young woman in desperate need of justice. But what if this was all carefully orchestrated? Stanfield's control over the story didn't stop at the courtroom. He continued to be involved in Gypsy's life long after her sentencing. From attending her baby shower to showing up at her book signings, Stanfield remained a constant presence in Gypsy's world, something that's highly unusual for a public defender. Why the continued involvement? Could it be that Stanfield is more invested in maintaining the version of events he helped create than in just defending his client?
They could have been anonymous for a very, very long time. Or they were misrepresented. I don't know. I wouldn't want to see me on a documentary and it looked like I'm saying something that I'm not, so they probably likely did say it. And then, of course,
What if he's worried that Gypsy might start telling a different version of the story, one that contradicts the narrative he carefully crafted to secure her plea deal? This continued involvement raises uncomfortable questions about the level of control Stanfield may still have over Gypsy's narrative. Is he keeping an eye on her, worried that she might start speaking more freely about the events that transpired? Or is he simply staying close because of his personal investment in the case? And if Stanfield was willing to manipulate key facts to secure Gypsy's plea deal, what else might he be covering up to maintain the carefully curated story of victimhood? As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case is not as straightforward as the public embraced the narrative that was presented to them. Gypsy as a victim, Dee as a villain, but as more details come to light, it's becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the inconsistencies and omissions that shaped this case.
When they're showing this information, they'll show you a document, but they don't expect anybody to read it because they're showing a highlighted portion that says MRI was normal. But then the next sentence say that there's something on Gypsy's spine.
Was Gypsy really the innocent victim she's been portrayed as? Or has her story been shaped by the very people who should have been seeking the truth? As more and more people begin to question the narrative, the lingering questions only grow. Was Mike Stanfield acting in Gypsy's best interests? Or was he manipulating the truth for his own purposes? How much of Gypsy's story is based on fact, and how much of it was created to shape public opinion and secure legal leniency? The case may be officially closed, but the truth is far from settled. Will Gypsy ever speak out about the parts of her story that remain hidden? Only time will tell. So what do you think? Was Mike Stanfield simply a defense attorney doing his job? Or did he cross ethical lines to secure Gypsy's freedom? What else could be hidden beneath the surface of this high-profile case? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video and don't forget to subscribe. This story is far from over.